Hi, my name is Yagoda, and I am currently a research assistant at the Law Commission, as well as a residential scholar at Gray's Inn. And I'm making this video to give some tips to students who might want to follow a similar career path. So to start with my role at the Law Commission, I do essentially assistance with various different parts of our projects. So I research any legal points that may come up and write research notes and give my opinion of the stance we should take. I engage in stakeholder engagement, so that might involve in a consultation period, going around the country doing the Law Commission tour and getting the word out about our projects, or liaising with departments to speak about implementation, as well as I generally assist with administration and project management, depending on the stage of the project and what it needs. So my tips for applicants who might want to apply to the Law Commission are, firstly, I think a really key part is structure. And that's both on the application form and on competency questions in the interview. You're bound to be asked questions like, when have you worked in a team? Or what are your research skills? And in those kind of questions, you want to follow the STAR structure. So you want to give an example of a situation you were in and a task you were undertaking, the actions you undertook to get that task done, and finally the result. And if you keep everything in that same structure, then that's much more clear for the interviewer or the reader of your application. Secondly, I would note that in policy, which is the area that the Law Commission is in, there tend to be no easy answers. So prior to the interview, you'll be given an exercise, a policy exercise where you give your views. And then in the interview, you'll also be asked and pushed on that. And I think there's a tendency for applicants to say, well, it's so obviously this, or it's really clear that it's that. But actually, if you're being asked that question, then it probably isn't clear. So the best way to approach it is to say, as we would do in any of our reports, here are the reasons for it. Here are the counterbalancing reasons against it. On balance, I would choose for because X, Y, Z. However, the way I would address the counterbalancing issues would be through this solution. So that might be, I don't know, defenses, limitations. Just make sure to think about everything around the topic and give a balanced, structured answer. Finally, I would also add that myself and most of my colleagues have a master's and also work experience. That's not to say it's impossible to get to the Law Commission straight out of your undergrad. There are some people who have, but it's much more rare. So you might want to consider gaining additional experience or additional qualifications before you apply. Particularly with a master's, I would say it's a huge financial undertaking, which can be difficult, and of course, a huge time commitment as well. Of course, I'm not suggesting that you should do it just to come to the Law Commission, but you might want to think about your career goals in general and how a master's might fit within them. Personally, I funded it through paralegaling for a year and saving from that. There are also scholarships, etc., available. Secondly, putting on my hat as a residential scholar at Gray's Inn. For those of you who might not know, the 4 Inns of Court are essentially associations for aspiring barristers and barristers, and they provide funding for applicants to be able to do the bar professional training course and then hopefully go on to the bar. So as a residential scholar, I'm currently actually living in Gray's Inn through the generosity of the inn. And my interview tips for gaining scholarships would be, firstly, current awareness. So whatever field you're interested in, make sure to keep on top of all of the current issues and debates in that field. That's also equally applicable to pupillage interviews. The way I would go about that is through subscribing to online services. For example, the Inner Temple does a great daily newsletter of all of the various updates from that day, which is invaluable. I also use Twitter, so I have quite an anonymous Twitter account where I follow all the top public law people, and that means that I get their thoughts on various issues as they come up, which is really invaluable. Secondly, both for interviews for scholarships and the bar in general, I would engage in mooting. There's really no better way to prepare for the bar and for interviews than to work on your speaking skills. And there is a huge difference between academically thinking through a point and being able to present that point clearly. There are plenty of people who have great academic skill but haven't really worked on the latter. So to work on the latter will really put you in a very good position. Secondly, I would find out what the bar actually looks like in practice, particularly in the area that you're interested in. So the way that you do that is, I think the simplest way is to just talk to people, go to different events, ask questions, try to find junior tenants or people who have just got pupillage, so you can find out what it's like, not just at the top end of the practice, but at the entry level. And also find out from them what's needed for that area of law, because different areas of the bar I find look for very different CVs and skill sets. So you really want to angle it to start thinking about what kind of a CV you need to build. And finally, just as a general tip, I would say self-care is really, really important. If you're someone who's ambitious and wants to go for the bar, the tendency will probably be to put yourself in very stressful, high-pressure situations, and it's a really key skill to be able to handle that high pressure. Personally, I meditate, I do yoga, I carve out time to see my friends, even when I'm under a lot of stress. But everyone has their ways. It's just something to think about. I hope I get to see you in person at some point. Until then, I'm happy to take any questions via email.